Welcome to episode 52 of Successful Demo. Each episode analyze the theoretical and practical aspects of one more newly released cards. Last time we did a criminal successful demo, it was with our favorite card, Diversion of Funds. And now it seems like this Siphon replacement has brought its friends along as well, the Desperado replacements in Bankroll and Paragon from Rain and Reverie. So let's look at these Desperado replacements. First off, Bankroll. This, unlike Desperado, does not add money straight to your bank. While Desperado pays the 1 credit on each successful run into your bank, Bankroll, well, banks it on the card itself. You cannot use those credits, they are not networker credits. The only way you can use them is if you cash it in by using the trash ability. So it pays off as much as a Desperado, but only at the point at which you trash it, after which it no longer generates economy. So it's a one-use Desperado, and not to mention that it consumes 1 memory instead of granting 1 memory like Desperado, inferior in so many ways. The only upsides I can see are that it costs 2 less to play, and that it stacks with itself, the latter point actually being rather important. You can potentially be getting multiple credits off each successful run with multiple bankrolls installed, so that's pretty interesting. But just like tech writers, or technical writers, because they are single use in that they go away when trashed, you know, there is a ceiling to how much they can pay off. And that's a problem. Now what about Desperado number 2? We got Paragon, what seems like the console replacement for Desperado. It trades the persistent effect. That means, you know, a Desperado rewards you with 1 credit for every successful run in the game, whereas Paragon only activates once per turn. Suddenly not looking so good, but it's trading that for the card peeking effect, where after the first successful run, you get to peek at the top card of your deck and optionally bury it under your deck if you don't like the looks of that card. So that seems like a pretty good trade, right? You get less money, but you get this pseudo card draw ability that criminals so badly need. Unfortunately, in my opinion, this is actually a significant downside, not being able to trigger Paragon more than once per turn, because it gives you that much less mileage out of its combo with Bankroll. One of the reasons why old Criminal was so strong, run-based Andromeda, for those of you who remembered it back in the day, was because there were so many run-based economy cards that you could play and trigger all at the same time. Desperado accounts Siphon as the HQ run economy event, and you have Termusian contracts, security testing, you know, so many cards that reward you with runs and giving you big bucks out of it. So you want to play all these cards at the same time, and Paragon not paying off on every single run, unlike Bankroll, really makes it that much worse, because you're getting if your turn is, you know, run 4 times to get lots of money, you're missing out on a lot of credits that Desperado would otherwise give you. So in short, Paragon and Bankroll are definitely no Desperado, and they are, you know, pretty decent attempts at replacing Desperado, but you can't replace the original thing without reprinting it. So that's all I have to say about these run cards. They are just not that good, just as Diversion of Funds is just an inferior version of Siphon. Nothing more to see here. The end. Well, I guess I owe you a game, so I guess we are going to play this Ken Tenma deck that runs all these set cards. We are going to be playing Apocalypse Ken Tenma, simply because Apocalypse is Criminal's cheapest way to break ice, let's face it. Yeah, there's no other way around it. Criminal breakers are in general utter shite, with the exception of Ormakur, which we are running. But otherwise, Criminal's breakers are what's holding this run-based archetype back. You will not profit much from your runs, because you are losing so much money to breaking big code gates and big sentries that are flying all over the place today. Yeah, it just doesn't fly. It just doesn't make sense to play run-based economy against all these big ice. So what better way to deal with big ice than to just destroy all of them at once with Apocalypse? There are some interesting synergies here, and why this deck works pretty well with Apocalypse. Firstly, yeah, by clearing all your opponent's ice, you can then drop a Bankroll on the next turn and start raking in the cash. You can also cash in a Bankroll that was installed before an Apocalypse, because it's a paid ability to use Bankroll. It's not a click ability, so you can fire it right before your final click where you land the Apocalypse, thereby taking all your hard-earned money and ready to roll for your next big turn. The other thing is that because this is criminal, you have this bypass run events, your spearfishing, your inside jobs. These will help you very much in landing those apocalypses. And yeah, this whole deck just synergizes very well by enabling those apocalypses to land and to gain big bucks while doing so. While you're limited with accesses, we have no multi-access in this deck, so it's a lot of plinking away with single accesses. However, it is virtually impossible for your opponent to score agendas the hard way because they will be threatened by apocalypses or remote sphere fishings or remote inside jobs one way or another. So this should be an interesting way to control the core by just utterly wrecking their board. Let's attempt this against a Wayland deck. Alright, today we are up against Titan Transnational. This is looking to be one of my worst possible matchups because Apocalypse simply doesn't do much. Even if you destroy all their ice, they can still score out for the win because they rely on fast advance to win, not scoring agendas traditionally via an iced remote. So this is going to be a challenging game, but we'll play it anyway. And I keep my opening hand simply because it has the two money cards that synergize together, Bankroll and Paragon. So my opponent installs a remote asset here, so immediately I get to put my Bankroll and Paragon to good use. Check my opponent's remote while gaining free money. I see an illegal arms factory which I'm too poor to trash, but I get 2 credits off it. 1 real credit and 1 Bankroll credit. Pretty good. As of the time of this recording, we have not implemented Rain and Reverie on Jinteki.net yet, so I'll have to manually do the scrying here. You'll see me struggling with this. In the end, I just decide to take an extra click so that I can draw the card, which allows me to see the card, and then I'll decide whether to bury it or to top deck it. Dirty Laundry is a good card because I desperately need burst economy at this point. This Ken Tenma deck does not run a lot of burst economy, even though it has a lot of sustained run based economy. So the Dirty Laundry is definitely a welcome respite. I'm definitely going to draw it here. Or not. Maybe I'll make another run instead, putting another credit on Bankroll. So here's where I misjudged a bit. There is, at this point, because Paragon has already triggered, I'm only getting the Bankroll money, in which case there's no reason for me to run. I could have just clicked for credit, which would have been strictly superior to doing the Bankroll, because the clicking for credit will allow me to get the credit in my credit pool instead of an unusable credit on Bankroll. But that's minor difference because we are going to recover from 2 credits right now to 6 credits with the Dirty Laundry draw. And then we're going to flush the Dirty Laundry into one of the servers. 2 to 6 because we are Ken Tenma. So yeah, that gives us an extra credit. And Paragon gives us another credit as well. So after that run, I'm up to 7 credits and I get another Bankroll money. We also get to fire Paragon once again, which shows me my next burst economy card. Sure gamble. I definitely want to draw that. I definitely want to play that. Very good stuff. So far, so good. We are making good money, but we are not winning the game. Our opponent is. They scored a hostile takeover last turn, and they're definitely going to start drawing into their fast advance combo. For those of you unaware, that's Project Atlas, scored by either an Audacity or a Reconstruction Contract into Dedication Ceremony. This looks like something I need to challenge, so I'm going to run R&D here first. I was hoping my opponent wouldn't rest the ice. Then I'll get a free R&D access, which means I can inside job HQ and then run Archive so I can launch an Apocalypse, thereby negating the need to check server 3, which may or may not have a Project Atlas in it. So now that my opponent has kept me out of R&D, I cannot launch the Apocalypse since I couldn't break the ice wall. I had to decide between checking the remote and firing an by firing an inside job, or to ignore the remote and hope that it wasn't an agenda. I decided to ignore the remote, hoping that my opponent wouldn't be so brazen as to drop a Project Atlas in a single ice remote versus Ken Tenma. So I ran server 1 for the Paragon trigger for the Bankroll money, and I saw a Spear Fishing. Very good card, I'm going to draw that. With Spear Fishing, I can now assault R&D and HQ on the same turn, without needing to fetch a breaker, which would then trigger Apocalypse. So I'm definitely going to keep that on the lookout on the horizon as my opponent reviews that the remote card is indeed not an agenda, it's a Rashida. which completely utterly floods their hand. Now this is a very interesting situation, because if they have the Audacity Atlas combo here, do you fire it? They'll force you to drop your entire hand, all the cards you just drew with Rashida. Doesn't seem like a good idea. If I were my opponent, I would definitely wait one more turn if I had drawn the Atlas Audacity combo. So yeah, a bit of a interesting combo there. Rashida, a very good card to draw into your combo pieces normally. Doesn't synergize very well with Audacity. Well, we don't know if our opponent has it yet, but one thing's for sure, they haven't found the reconstruction contract into dedication ceremony into Atlas combo yet, because they're not firing it just yet. Instead, they're gonna install double advance. Interesting. They're gonna score a second hostile takeover, putting the score at 0-2. Now, as good as that is for my opponent, unfortunately, they are forced to ditch a bunch of cards here, and I feel like this is the perfect opportunity to launch the Apocalypse. Two things. Firstly, by launching an Apocalypse, I get a discount on trashing the illegal arms factory. It's a very expensive 6 to trash, but with Apocalypse, I can do that clicklessly, as in I'm destroying my opponent's ice while getting rid of the illegal arms factory that's empowering my opponent, for a mere 3 credits on the Apocalypse. The second thing is, my opponent may have discarded some of their valuable ice, thinking that they won't need ice, given that they've already found 1 ice for each critical server. They may not see this Apocalypse coming. So I'm going to Spearfish HQ, see the dedication ceremony, confirming that my opponent is indeed on the fast advance plan. Paragon fires here. We see a rebirth. Rebirth is very awesome. I'm going to talk about that a bit later. Second click is going to be run archives. I want to see what my opponent has ditched into archives. I want to see some ice here. I want to see, nope, they did not ditch any ice. They ditched an Audacity, a Boom, so they have killed, they have fast advance, but the ice they might have kept in hand, which was a good strategy against the Apocalypse that was impending. I launched the Apocalypse before forgetting that I forgot to liberate the money off Bankroll. Oops, takesy backsies, I'm going to trash the Bankroll for 7 credits before Apocalypsing. Of course, anyone would do that. Yeah, my mistake there. So we end our turn on 14 credits, and our opponent ends their turn with no ice. Win-win situation for us. Let's see what move our opponent makes here. Now, we did not see any ice in the bin. Either they have not drawn any ice since then, or they have very smartly kept all their ice in their hand in preparation for the impending Apocalypse. If it's the latter, my opponent's playing very, very smartly. We know that the top card of R&D is a hedge fund, so we know that they did not top deck an ice. Let's see if they can protect the centrals here, because if they don't, I'm just going to wail on him by, you know, making a bunch of runs. Right, so, you know, we're not winning the game just yet. We are getting lots of single accesses here and there with spearfishings, with inside jobs and everything, but we're not actually finding agendas, which is pretty curious. Turns out that our opponent has found an ice and they're putting it on R&D, signaling to us that they probably don't have agendas in hand. No important agendas anyway. So because of that, I don't bother with running. Don't forget, Paragon has been turned face down. This is a downside of playing Paragon in an Apocalypse deck. Instead, I'm going to set up here, setting up Leela Patel with Rebirth, which is why I really wanted to keep the Rebirth, and a chop bot so that I can chop away the face down Paragon that went due to Apocalypse. Now, Leela is the best ID for such an Apocalypse deck, because you are able to undo your opponent's board state and potentially open an Apocalypse window with Leela's ability after your opponent attempts to score agendas. And lots of corps are trying to score agendas nowadays, so Leela, very powerful runner. Can even enable you during the Apocalypse turn if an inside job or spear fishing hits an agenda, making your future runs easier. Alright, so here we chop bot, draw into Diversion of Funds. A very interesting card, if not for the fact that my opponent's on a very flush 21 credits, so we don't bother with the Diversion of Funds. They're too rich, obviously. So yeah, the Diversion of Funds is not going to make a difference. Instead, we want accesses, which is why I go for the 2 remotes, make sure there are no agendas on the table, and then run R&D after I stole the global food off the table. Not sure why they put it on the table just like that, naked. They might be going for an exchange of information here, but they don't have any tagging cards, so a bit curious there. I ran, my opponent now finds 2 pieces of ice, central ices each of them. and then proceeds to make what was probably the biggest mistake in the entire game. My opponent played very smartly, finding the correct piece of ice to put on R&D, deterring my runs on their server with agendas, and then now icing up HQ, very well recovering from the initial apocalypse. So yeah, my opponent has been playing this very well, but they're about to make a crucial mistake that could easily seal their fate this game. They played hard-hitting news. So yeah, I did not see that coming, no. I did not realize my opponent was actually into the tagging plan as well. Most Titan decks run a single boom just in case the runner's a tank me runner, but they don't usually run hard-hitting news. I took a quick glance at my credit pool, my hand, and my board, and realized that this hard-hitting news was a very minor tempo hit. I cleared 4 tags this turn, safe with the comfort knowing that next turn I would go up to 6 credits thanks to daily cast, and I have a sure gamble in hand that puts me at a very comfortable 10 credits. So I was in no danger of getting hit by a second hard-hitting news again. And yeah, my opponent basically siphoned themselves. They lost 10 credits thereabouts playing that hard-hitting news, which means that diversion of funds suddenly becomes relevant again. We are going to see this in action pretty soon, but first we need to find a way into HQ. We haven't found our icebreaker yet. We are running 3 Ormakuas, 3 special orders. I fully expect one to turn up right about now. Nope. Now. Nope. Still haven't found it. This is very unlucky. I can't run the centrals. They have iced their centrals. I can't run them without inside jobs, sphere fishings, or Ormakuas. So I'm frantically digging through my deck, trying to find my breakers. Now the nice a nice synergy here with Chopbot and Daily Cast is that once Daily Cast ticks down 3 times, going down to 2 credits, you can then sell it to Chopbot. Unfortunately, here my opponent scores Project Atlas with a Biotic Label. This is a good and bad thing. The bad news is they now have an Atlas counter and 2 more Atlases unaccounted for. But the good news is they are now in perfect siphon range. I drop a diversion of funds on the HQ that is now exposed because of Leela's ability. Right, I bounce the HQ ice and now I am free to siphon, and since I found my breaker, I'm going to start chalking up Ormakua counters. While my opponent is stuck on 0 credits, they can't score agendas. Normally at this point as the corp, it's a very simple victory line. You use the Atlas counter to tilt up another Atlas and you score the second Atlas with the Audacity in hand. I believe my opponent has an Audacity in hand at this point. That only costs 2 credits to play. Or is it 1 credit? Either way, very cheap, and the next turn they can simply fast advance a hostile takeover for the win. So basically at this point, at 4 agendas up, my opponent is threatening the game win in 2 to 3 turns. I needed to race to the finish line before they got there, so I ran HQ, stole global food, which opened a path for me into R&D. I ran R&D and saw a piece of ice, not very useful here. Now at this point, I need to make a judgment call. I know that they can score another Atlas on 3 credits because, as I said, Audacity into Atlas counter into Atlas will do the trick. So, do I allow them to do that, or do I play another diversion of funds, delaying delaying that fast advance for another turn? Very, very tricky choice here. Usually I want to hold off the diversion of funds until they reach the 5 credit level where I can get maximum mileage out of the diversion of funds, but in this case I needed to prolong the game for as long as I can. By prolonging the game this way, I get another shot at the top of R&D. If I hit a Project Atlas off the top of R&D, my life would perhaps be a bit easier. So yeah, I chose to siphon them here, meaning that they were forced to click for credits again this turn, which buys me another turn to run R&D and perhaps chalk up more Ormakua counters. Now my opponent here ices HQ and takes 2 credits. I don't really care what the ice is. I have Ormakua and they don't have 4 credits, so Archer is out of the question. I can pretty easily and safely check their R&D, seeing a hard-hitting news. That stays there. I'm going to draw a bit, see an inside job. Now I'm going to run HQ here. I'm not respecting Titanium, but if they res Titanium, they are setting themselves 1 agenda point back, which I don't mind at all. We access HQ here for an Audacity, thereby confirming that my opponent does have the combo in hand. or rather just the card they need to fast advance the next Atlas. So I definitely need to get all my accesses in here. I do not find any agendas, so here my opponent can perform the use Project Atlas to tutor Project Atlas and score with Audacity trick. You're about to see that happen. My opponent plays very wisely here, knowing that at this point their out was not the hard-hitting news into boom. They are way too poor for that. Their winning line was definitely the fast advance, as they're doing right here. This puts the scoreline at 4-6. With an Atlas counter, my opponent only needs 2 credits to win the game. They just need 2 credits at the start of their turn to score a hostile takeover. Thankfully, they end the turn with exactly 1 credit, buying me 1 more additional turn to find the winning agenda. I run archives here, and they actually had their 3rd global food in the bin. So now we are even, 6-6. Can I find the winning agenda of R&D? Do I find it? I do! It's the last Project Atlas for the win. So yeah, that was a successful game in the sense that I won it. Despite my opponent's favorable matchup, I must say my opponent played very well that game, playing to their outs, knowing what their win condition was. They just slipped up that one turn. They decided to switch their win condition to the kill without knowing that I could easily recover from it. And in fact, abuse my opponent's lack of money by playing diversion of funds. But we are not here to discuss the matchup, we are here to discuss Paragon and Bankroll. And while this may not be the best showcase of a run-based deck, you know, we are not up against something like an asset spam, and our opponent recovered very nicely from our apocalypse, we'll still go through the motions. Paragon earned 4 credits this game, but if you take into account the install costs, it made a measly 1 credit this game. I'm not impressed by that. The peeking ability was very useful, but if you notice, it did not save any clicks at all, because I ended up keeping the cards that I saw on the top of my deck, meaning that it did not save me a click, because what Paragon can do is that if it buries a card that you would never need, like a duplicate Armor Core when you already have 1 installed, then it saves you a click from having to draw that Armor Core. But in this game, it didn't save me a click at all, because it turns out that my deck has a very high density of useful cards, lots of events, run events, especially because I'm playing Ken Tenma. So Paragon, you know, rarely gets to save clicks from drawing. So this is something I'm learning about this deck. It just doesn't make very good use of Paragon, because the draw filtering ability is not as useful as it can be in other decks, and it doesn't linger on the board long enough to generate enough money. Had it stayed on the board after the apocalypse, it would have earned me 5 more credits, making it a lot more profitable. But as it stands, apocalypse forces you to flip over your Paragon, so you know, it can only pay off so much. So the anti-synergy with apocalypse flipping your cards face down is the deal breaker here. Even though Paragon is a decent console, my verdict is it's not good enough to justify running Paragon in an apocalypse deck, simply because you're not going to get enough mileage out of Paragon to justify installing it. Bankroll is a different story though. It earns 7 credits this game for a net gain of 6 credits. So right there you can see the world of a difference you get between Paragon and Bankroll when you remove the once per turn restriction, and well, it helps that Bankroll is cheaper to install. Bankroll then earns me 6 credits with 1 click to install Bankroll, instead of earning 1 credit to install a Paragon. That's 6 times the return, and it's markedly more than the gold standard burst economy card in Sure Gamble. I'll take that any day. It's also good in an apocalypse deck because it doesn't anti-synergize like Paragon does. You pop it right before you launch the apocalypse, so yeah, you are not going to be shortchanged of money, and more importantly, you are always guaranteed at least 3 credits before you pop it prior to the apocalypse, because to fire off the apocalypse you need to run all 3 centrals once, so that's 3 successful runs for your Bankroll immediately. Bankroll is a very good card within an apocalypse deck because, you know, it feeds the apocalypse, and because the apocalypse trigger condition feeds the Bankroll. Of course, there's a small little caveat here. We mentioned at the start of the video that Bankroll's one big downside is that it doesn't immediately pay out like Desperado. The money doesn't go into your bank, it goes on the card itself where you cannot use it, and this could be a big problem. in the early game if you're trying to make runs to get money, because had my opponent found their hard-hitting news on turn 2 instead of 4 turns later as they did this game, it would have been a very different game, because I was stuck at the end of my first turn with only 2 credits to my name. Had they landed a hard-hitting news there, I was probably dead in the water. The boom would have got me. I did not have the money to clear the tags then. So Bankroll, a lot more risky to play in hard-hitting news meta. This is something you have to be wary about. While you're setting up the Bankroll, you might get hit by a bunch of tags. Now let's go on to the usual combos and nombos. Well, not a lot to say about nombos. Apocalypse was the big one that I covered, but lots and lots of combos to talk about, simply because there's so many cards in the card pool that synergizes with successful runs, which is what a runner wants to be doing anyway. First off, Armor Core and Data Sucker, and basically most of the viruses like Usurp and Hemorrhage, things that trigger off successful runs. It seemed like they were going to shift all the run-based cards into Anarch and make them viruses so they can't snowball out of control, the co-op can purge them. But it seems like they've also put in some run-based economy for Criminal. So when you put 2 and 2 together, these viruses plus Paragon and Bankroll can become a force to reckon with. They both feed into each other and can become a very powerful deck, if not for the fact that they take up a lot of memory. This is something you have to be careful if you're playing lots of viruses and Bankroll. It's going to eat up all your memory, and you don't have a lot of it because you're playing Paragon as your console, which gives 1 memory. So you won't have many slots left for your breakers, so that could be a problem. But otherwise, viruses and run-based economy really do go hand in hand. Too bad we didn't get to see much action of Armor Core with Bankroll and or Paragon this game, simply because of the Apocalypse. Armor Core appeared too late, while Paragon and Bankroll appeared before the Apocalypse. But trust me, when having Bankroll and Armor Core out on the table at the same time, being able to charge both cards by 4 by running Archives 4 times each turn is a really sweet feeling. Next up, we have Mining Accident. I think this is the go-to card you want if you're trying to play a run-based Ken Tenma that isn't Apocalypse. Mining Accident makes your central runs cheaper, which means it's easier to make successful runs to get more money off Bankroll and Paragon. And when you make your central run to trigger Mining Accident, you're getting money off Bankroll and Paragon as well. Very good synergy right there, and really helps alleviate the problem of ice being too expensive for Criminal to break. The bad publicity can go a very long way, or at least slow the co-op down. These cards, run-based cards, also synergize with clickless runs because it turns the clickless run cards like Marathon and Jack Sinclair into economy cards of their own. Marathon particularly nice with Bankroll because they both can be played potentially an unbounded number of times each turn, or rather trigger an unbounded number of times each turn. So yeah, Bankroll right there negating Marathon's play cost. So essentially what you get are free remote runs for the rest of the game, which is pretty sweet. Jack Sinclair on the other hand becomes a pseudo underworld context / data folding because you get to run every turn and get a free credit from Paragon. Optionally as well, peeking at the top card of your deck, very nice energy right there. In addition, Paragon also synergizes very well with the first successful run you make each turn cards. I'm looking at Find the Truth and Security Testing as the more powerful ones in the current meta. Not only do you get to peek at the top card / get 2 credits of Security Testing, you're getting an additional credit on top of it. Paragon gives you that much more value without having to spend any extra clicks. Right? Paragon's credit gaining ability is clickless. So very nice synergy with these 2 cards. They both only require 1 run per turn, so yeah, you won't be spending your entire turn running. You can spend the next 3 clicks setting up, drawing cards, and so on. Very nice synergy right there. In short, there is no shortage of cards with which to synergize with Paragon and Bankroll. The only real issue is it justifiable to run in your deck? We note that Bankroll and Paragon, as good as they are still not comparable to Desperado. Yeah, Desperado really is the best of both Bankroll and Paragon fused together, and it just isn't the same. Not to mention that because of their lower power level, Bankroll and Paragon are not really easy to justify splashing out of faction, as opposed to Desperado, which was ran out of faction for the longest time throughout Netrunner's history. That being said, as I said, they do synergize with a lot of cards in the meta. The real question is in the deck building phase. Can you justify running all those run-based cards in Criminal? I'm talking about your Data Sucker, your Mining Accident, your Jack Sinclair. Can you justify putting them in your Criminal deck? Because as I said, it's pretty hard to splash these out of faction. There are better cards you can buy for your buck, or rather your 2 influence outside of Criminal. So the question is, in Criminal, do cards like Jack Sinclair and Data Sucker deserve a spot? And if they do, well, you can play them with Bankroll and Paragon and watch the money roll in. Thanks for watching and happy net running. I'll see you next time. Ciao!